Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the 2022 Hawaii Work-Based Learning convening. We hope you enjoyed the opening. And again, we would like to remind everyone that today's presentation is being recorded and will be posted to the event website. Please keep all cameras off and all microphones muted throughout the session if you would not like to be recorded. Artificial intelligence will be providing live captioning for accessibility purposes. Captions may not accurately reflect what is being said, so for that reason, captions will be corrected for session recordings. Recordings and resources will be posted to the event website between 3 to 4 weeks after today's presentation. If you have any questions for today's presenters, please add them to the chat box, and a moderator will share your questions at the end of the session. So I am your moderator for this session today. I'm Dana Pettis, one of the site coordinators with Hawaii P20, and I am very excited for our session looking at a framework for pre-apprenticeship programs. And we are so fortunate to have Krysti Specht, Associate Director at JFF, with us today, coming all the way from Florida. So let's go ahead and get her presentation up and we will get started.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you all, and thank you for having me. Yes, I'm coming by way of Florida, so I know it is bright and early in the morning for you all, but I am about ready to get to dinner pretty soon here. So I'm happy to be able to relive today with you all. Thank you, Dana, for the introduction. Again, my name is Krysti Specht. I'm an Associate Director with Jobs for the Future, specifically with our Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. And I'm happy to be able to share some more about pre-apprenticeship and the framework for a quality pre-apprenticeship with you today. Next slide, please. Thank you. So real briefly, I want to just mention what JFF is and talk about who we are as an organization. So Jobs for the Future is a national organization that sits at the center of workforce and education. And specific to the work that I do, we are always focused on how to make sure that the education world aligns with the workforce world and how those two can speak to each other when otherwise, as we all know very well, those two worlds can operate very separately. So JFF is dedicated to this, also focusing on policy, whether that's federal, state, local, regional alignment, economic development. We're very busy trying to really affect these worlds at large. So happy to be able to be here from JFF. So with the Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning, we were founded in 2017, really in response to a federal government push for more apprenticeships. There may be folks on the line who maybe were recipients of an AEI grant maybe in the past, which was an Obama era grant initiative to launch apprenticeship programs in sectors otherwise disconnected to apprenticeship or work-based learning programs. So JFF built the center, and we have been working through building out pipelines to apprenticeship, building registered apprenticeship programs all over the country, as well as internship programs, and trying to really sell these types of pipelines as valuable pipelines for individuals who otherwise may be left out of certain occupations or not have access to certain training. So that is really our focus. And I'll be bringing more of a lens on, I'm going to be more speaking to probably IT in this space as a sector focus to try to make sure that this is contextual to the group. So next slide, please. So again, hi, nice to meet you all. I'm the order of this, I wanted to go big to small, JFF down. Again, I'm an associate director with the center. My background is that I, for many years of my life, actually ran federally funded TRIO programs, which are programs that support low-income first-generation students going to college. I was focused in high schools and middle school, so I spent many years in those institutions, specifically in San Francisco and Southern California. After that, I worked to advocate for those entities in DC, which was a great experience, and something TRIO programs are just very near and dear to my heart. Afterwards, I worked for the city and county of San Francisco for a mayoral initiative called Tech SF. And that initiative was meant to build bridges for local job seekers who were really left out of our innovation sector. So our tech sector in San Francisco, which is a very elite institution at large, and really poaches international talent, and builds this really behemoth industry in the Bay Area. So we were building out pipelines for that. And in doing so, we were building work-based learning opportunities, including pre-apprenticeships, apprenticeships, and internship opportunities with some of the globe's most prominent tech employers. And now I work for JFF, and I am hyper-focused on building those two worlds together. So focusing on youth and how to really make sure that youth can actually move into the industries they're interested in, and really heavily focused on tech and IT occupations, as these are very high demand and high growth occupations. Next slide, please. All right, so let's dive into defining what pre-apprenticeship programs are. So I'm going to go through what this definition says, and then I'm going to go through what it doesn't say as well. So this definition says that pre-apprenticeship programs are training initiatives. They're designed to prepare individuals to enter and succeed in registered apprenticeship programs, which is the ideal, or another high quality apprenticeship program. I like to think of that as maybe it can be a high quality apprenticeship program, internship, fellowship, post-secondary education, but ultimately you're preparing individuals for a foundation in a career that they're looking for. What you don't see in this definition are time requirements, skill requirements, length of pre-apprenticeship requirements, amount of information that needs to go into it. Pre-apprenticeships are at large a little bit more fluffy than maybe a registered apprenticeship program, which is very, very much so quality controlled and regimented. A pre-apprenticeship program can really be built to support whatever apprenticeship program, or if there's the vision of an apprenticeship program in the future, but to build out that pathway in the most succinct and powerful way you possibly can. But it is up to you all to really decide, what do your students need for the best success? Is it 3 months? Is it 4 months? Is it really, you don't know. Maybe it's a number of hours or a number of competencies that somebody needs to meet. That's really up to you. And that's the exciting thing about pre-apprenticeship. It's really how you get to build it. Next slide, please. All right, so real briefly, these are the organizations or entities that can provide pre-apprenticeship programs. So CBOs, high schools, workforce agencies, workforce boards, community colleges, four-year colleges can as well, or labor organizations. Commonly, we see these 5 as our prominent entities that provide, that provide pre-apprenticeship programs, although pre-apprenticeship programs can really live and really merge out of any of these spaces. Next slide, please. All right. So a quality pre-apprenticeship program is intended to achieve the following 5 components. So first, the goal is that it will link directly to an apprenticeship program. Now, of course, the ideal would be that it links directly to a registered apprenticeship program. However, there are situations when it maybe links to a non-registered program or an additional education component in their life, so maybe a degree program. Whatever it connects to, the goal of a pre-apprenticeship program is that it is the first step to a second step, and that second step is ideally registered apprenticeship. Second, it's going to prepare individuals who are underrepresented in high quality employment opportunities. So for example, you want to be looking at your high demand, high growth career options where folks who are underrepresented in that sector have been predominantly left out. And those are areas where you might want to find avenues for pre-apprenticeship. Third, it'll create a bridge to career opportunities for students, new workers, and again, underrepresented learners. So the pre-apprenticeship, again, will act as that bridge to a career option where they may have been left out in the past. Fourth, it'll increase diversity, equity, and access really throughout the apprenticeship and workforce systems. So one of the pieces that we've seen over the years is that even though there is an amplification and a growth of apprenticeship programs in this country, we still see a lot of populations are continually left out. And so one of the pieces that we at JFF have been anchoring in on is thinking about where pre-apprenticeship programs can live so that individuals don't feel there is a barrier to entry into an apprenticeship program. So a pre-apprenticeship program will create that guidance, that foundational readiness, so folks can move very seamlessly into a registered apprenticeship program in their future. And lastly, it'll provide essential instruction, preparation, and supports that participants need so that they're successful in their next career path. And I'll dive more deeply into this in terms of those aspects of what is preparation. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to dive into our framework. So JFF has a framework of 6 components for a high quality pre-apprenticeship program. And I'm going to go through those I'm going to dive into them real briefly, and then I'm going to go through them individually. And then I'm going to move into an example of a pre-apprenticeship program that I've worked with in the past that I feel is very high quality, and dive into those elements so you can actually contextualize what makes it so successful. Next slide, please. All right, so I apologize. I'm just going to kind of cruise through these and read off of them, and then I'm going to dive into them deeper. So the first element of success, right, or of key aspect is transparent entry and success requirements. So individuals knowing how to get in to a program. Second, the alignment with skills sought by local employers and high quality apprenticeship programs. So understanding that a pre-apprenticeship program is, again, that bridge. Third, the culmination in one or more industry recognized credentials, so that when they go through a pre-apprenticeship program, they don't just go through it and that's it. They gain a little bit of something that can will help them transition in their career and grow in their career. Fourth, the development of skills through hands-on activities and work-based learning. So the students would hypothetically be able to get their hands dirty and be able to practice what they're learning. So it's not just theoretical, but they're exercising the skill set on the ground. Fifth, offering of academic career exploration and wraparound supports. So this is the culmination of using your technical learning, the technical skills, the career skills, and then making sure that those learners have actual supports to keep them invested in this program. And lastly, that it will transition into a registered apprenticeship or other high quality apprenticeship program. So of course, the end goal is that they will be able to move on to another program and practice these skills and get some money for it and get paid and have a career, right? So next slide, please. All right, so characteristic number 1. So we're looking at the transparent entry and success requirements. So the key pieces for students or learners to know right out the gate is, what do they need to get into this program? What do they need to succeed? And what do they need in order to progress from a pre-apprentice to a registered apprenticeship program? So hypothetically, right, the perfect world situation is that you have a pre-apprenticeship program that builds out skills, and then the learners, all of them, so let's say you have 6, all 6 are able to cohesively transition into an apprenticeship program in the future. Now, that's the perfect world situation. In some sectors, that can be built out very cleanly. I see that with trade sectors, that's absolutely can be built. There are other occupations that can be built too. But with some of the more white collar or high demand roles, sometimes occupations, there may not be enough room in an occupation at a company for every pre-apprentice to move through. So you're trying to also develop, hey, maybe if an apprenticeship doesn't work, what else can work for you too? But an individual should know when they come in how to get in, what they're going to learn, that it's attainable for them to get in, what they need to do to succeed, and what they need to do in order to move forward. This is really about making sure that the program is equitable and accessible for anyone. I've seen some programs that are national programs have very high bars to entry. And what that ends up doing is making people feel that they can't even apply to a program. So really being very concise and saying this is an entry level opportunity for individuals, right? Pre-apprenticeship programs are an entry point, and pointing to all those areas that a learner needs in order to succeed and how they can get in. Is it an application? Is it an essay? Is it just talking with someone, right? What do they need to do in order to get in? Those should be very transparent out the gate when you are posting a pre-apprenticeship program for learners to apply to. Next slide, please. alignment with skills. So this is really three buckets, right? So you're looking at your soft skills, which are your, how do I perform in my job? What is teamwork? How do I take constructive feedback? How do I give constructive feedback? How do I send an email properly? All of those components that make you ready for the workplace. Those soft skills should be developed in alignment with the sector the individuals are moving into. So I speak to tech a lot, right? So for me, that really is how to respond to an email, how to develop, how to even schedule a team meeting, how to be able to communicate with your peers in a very in a solid way. Next are those technical skills. So these are the skills that they would be performing on the job. This will be the bulk of the pre-apprenticeship program, or should be the bulk. However, I see soft skills development as a very, very strong second. And then academic credentials is what it should really be all pulling up to. It should all be pushed together so that they are receiving some type of credential in this. And that will be aligned with the sector they are looking to go into. So the curriculum that is developed for all of this work, so a pre-apprenticeship program, should be cohesive to create a foundation of success so that an individual can move forward easily. Next, please. So third, so it should result in the culmination of one or more industry credentials. So these credentials should be vetted by employers. They should not be credentials that are necessarily something that are one-off credentials. So again, specific to technology or IT fields, there are a lot of credentials that are floating in that space, right? I could go online and take a course in Coursera right now if I wanted to, or LinkedIn Learning, and learn something that may be really applicable to my occupation I look to go into, but maybe it's not that valuable in my industry. I don't know. So I think about that. These credentials should be in demand. They should be recognized by your local industry. So your industry should be able to tell you that, right? What are they looking for? Why is it valuable? And then it should allow these individuals to use these credentials to access the workforce. So they should not be taking a credential and then being told by employers, like, that is not what we want, right? This credential should be something that they can stack on top of it or that they can build on. And it should be something that they can take with them to other places. So I think about CompTIA A+ certification, for example. CompTIA is an IT certification that is on so many different job postings, right? If you're looking to go into IT. And CompTIA is something you can take with you and you can stack on top. So you can develop other credentials to go with it, but you also can move from one company to a next and be agile with this. So it gives you direct entry into the workforce. Next slide, please. All right, so the utilization of your hands-on activities and work-based learning. This one is my favorite. So the program should include taking the theory of what you're learning and actually implementing it in a workspace. So is that maybe sitting in a computer lab and breaking apart your computer and reinstalling your computer so that it is you know where your hardware is, you know where all your pieces of the computer are? That would be an example of some solid foundational hands-on learning. This also should be experiential and problem-based. So problem-based an example of this might be that you are having to diagnose an issue and that maybe in your class of students, there is a race to see who can diagnose the issue the fastest. But that all students will be able to diagnose the issue of whatever is going on with their computer. It also should be, there should be input received from employers and or apprenticeship sponsors about this. One of the most successful ways I've seen this work is that when an organization or a workforce board or a college has a set of employer partners or even a board, that you have those board members or you have those educators come in and work with the students in the classroom so that they're either providing maybe some levels of tutoring or they're troubleshooting problems with the students or they themselves are actually leading an event so that the students can learn. So it's really merging that workplace learning, that work-based learning as well with actual employers in the space. so they can contextualize their learning. This also helps them navigate the culture and the policies and the procedures and all the things that are kind of unwritten about moving into a sector that students or individuals are just expected to know, right? The culture of maybe working in a manufacturing plant or on, being a lineman or something along those lines is going to be different than sitting in an office or working with a team virtually or behind the scenes in a computer. They just are going to be different cultures and different expectations. So that is a really important component of this, is that they're receiving all of the learning so that all different types of learners can learn in the context that they need. Next slide, please. Alrighty, so offering academic, career exploration, and wraparound supports. So this is the combination of providing supports that are, well, I'm going to start with wraparounds first, because that really is the premise on if a student can even stay in a program or a learner can stay in a program. So this should include maybe tutoring or case management, or I have seen laptops given out, childcare, access to any types of medical treatment if that is an issue, maybe temporary housing, maybe a bus card, pieces like this. I've seen organizations really struggle with this before and also really succeed at it. And the ones that succeed, their students continue to persist, right? Because of course we are all trying to reach the learners who maybe have been left behind in the past. So this is really a fundamental part that if this component is built first, I think, then you can really lean into the academic and career exploration components. But wraparounds to me are what keep a student invested. So your industry and career paths, or your academic and career exploration components. So the career exploration parts that I've seen be very effective are when there are actual folks who work in the industry that come back in and talk about their trajectory, right? How did they get into this job? This is all part of a strong pre-apprenticeship program, is that exposure piece. So folks are coming back into the classroom to talk to learners or students and say, hey, I didn't start in this sector, but this is how I got here. And let me tell you the things that I maybe had to do, and let me give you that leg up so that you can stay connected to me as you move through this sector. Also working with a career coach on navigating what different types of occupations they're interested in and why they're interested in those occupations. Pre-apprentices should not just have one super narrow vision, right? They might have that vision because younger learners sometimes know, they're like, I want to do this. This is what I want to be. And then as things kind of move, maybe they move a little bit, but they should have options, right? A pre-apprenticeship program should build foundational skills to move them into other opportunities. So it shouldn't just be a super narrow pipeline. If they're looking at IT, maybe that IT program has some software engineering involved. Maybe it has some front and back end design, user experience, so that they're getting that exposure to other opportunities and occupations still in the IT field. Additionally, it should work out long and short-term goals. So if the short-term goal is that they're getting a credential and moving into maybe a 4-year college, a 2-year college, or that they're looking straight to go into employment, what are they really thinking about, right? Do they really want to go into college and then transition into another occupation? Are they looking at an apprenticeship that they want to stay in a specific company? What are their short and long-term goals? And making sure that if they have barriers, how will those barriers be addressed as they continue through a pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship program? That is really, to me, maybe the most important part, is making sure that there is a plan for barrier removal or ensuring that they have all the systems in place to support their development and growth through the pre-apprenticeship program. Next slide, please. All right, and lastly, that this program should transition into a registered apprenticeship program. That is, of course, the optimal goal, but sometimes it moves into an apprenticeship program that may not be registered. Sometimes the learners go on to post-secondary education, post-secondary training, or I've even seen learners go on to fellowships or paid internships or other pieces as well. But that is the ultimate goal, is that they will transition to a registered apprenticeship. Next slide, please. All right, so I want to walk us through an example, And anyone on the line now can actually kind of, if they wanted to, they want to do a Google search real quick. The organization is called Dev Mission. It's on the screen. It's in San Francisco, and they have a pre-apprenticeship program. And I use them as an example because I've walked through the framework and matched all pieces of their pre-apprenticeship program to this framework. So to contextualize this, you have your first one, right? Your transparent entry. So students apply via DevMission's website. First, they demonstrate interest on the website. That's what they do. And then their availability. So these students do not need to show up and have any IT or previous experience. They just have to really want this and be excited about it and demonstrate that. Once they fill out an application, they talk with the team member. The team member checks those boxes, right? Are you who you say you are? Are you available these days? Did anything change, right? Young people's lives, or even college students, their lives change all the time. So it's important that they are actually able to dedicate some time to the program. Easy peasy, transparent entry points, very available. Number 2, the alignment with skills. So students in this program are learning a lot, and they're learning a lot in different buckets. So it's really 4 buckets. So you're looking at your IT, occupation skills. So taking apart your computer, hardware, actually understanding being able to troubleshoot issues when your computer's having issues. And then all of that really leads into what is a career in IT. Then you also have kind of their engineering component, their software engineering. So these are your programming languages. And students are learning some HTML, some JavaScript, some CSS. They're learning how to code, and they're learning those network languages, because really in any tech job, you actually need to know some of those network languages, at least a baseline understanding of what they are and why they're used. And these can lead to other careers, and it says that on their website as well. They also are learning the Internet of Things, which is, I've seen some of these students actually build drones and fly them, and it's kind of incredible, or develop these scrolls that talk to you. And they're actually applying their skills for that hands-on learning piece, but they're actually applying it there as well. So that's the 3rd bucket. And the 4th is their career readiness, the exposure, the learning how to interview. I've held one-on-one interviews with these students and actually grilled them and seen how they do. And these learners actually do that with folks in the field as well. So those are their 4 buckets that they apply to every single learner. And they get the choice of where they really want to shine. Do they want to do more programming? Do they want to do more hardware? What do they like? And that's how they kind of help with their career pathway. The 3rd is the culmination into an industry credential. So these students are given access to Google certifications while they enroll. They also have access into CompTIA A+ networking, which is, again, an industry vetted credential for IT. So they have those two worlds to work through. Google certificates have a range of different certificates students can do, and they have access to all of them. So they get to pick that pathway for themselves and take that foundational certification, which is industry-wide, and lean on that. Next slide, please. All right, so the hands-on activities. So these students actually sit in a computer lab and they dissect everything. They dissect all the hardware in the world. They take apart all their computers. They put them back together. It is high stakes, I'll tell you that much, because if you don't put it back together, you don't get to do the rest of your work. And they build prototypes. They create websites, and they're all responsible for demoing what they create at the end of their pre-apprenticeship, which their pre-apprenticeship program runs for about 3.5 months or so. And again, it culminates into this end of their pre-apprenticeship program where they demonstrate their skill set for an audience, which is exciting not for them. A lot of times they're kind of shy or they don't really want to do that, but it's great for them to be showcasing their skills. And folks are excited. They bring industry folks to the actual graduation so they can meet people, shake their hands, say hi. And that's really exciting to see their families there as well, which gives that sense of accomplishment, and it's really exciting. 5th, the academic, career, and wraparound services. So these students receive a laptop at the start of their program, and this laptop can stay with them actually, and I didn't mention this in the slides, they actually are given this laptop as long as they graduate from the program. They keep the laptop. They also are given stipends upon completion as well. They may have changed that so that it's multiple times throughout the program. Initially, it was just a stipend at the end. So they got a laptop and a stipend at the end for going through this program. They also receive food during any of their trainings. I know their CEO and team will go pick up students sometimes if they're stuck and they can't get to the actual training program or headquarters. Some of them will get support with temporary housing and individual tutoring and career counseling sessions. All of them go through career counseling. All of them have access to individual tutoring whenever they need it. They just make appointments to have it. And lastly, a transition to an apprenticeship. So students transition to apprenticeship programs. Some of them are registered, some of them are non. The registered ones in the past have been Postmates. I know they have Twitter on their website as well. And they also have App Dynamics and Uber. They also have worked with Airbnb in the past, and those are non-registered, and students have absolutely transitioned from a pre-apprenticeship program to that apprenticeship program. Which, fun fact about that one is that even during COVID, when Airbnb laid off a huge amount of their staff, their software engineering apprentices were kept on because they were vital pieces to their workforce. So that was a really beautiful example of how a pre-apprenticeship to apprenticeship program not only elevated these students' lives, but it also really created a vessel for long-term growth in an industry that is so hard to get into. Alrighty, next slide. All right, I'm done talking. Thank you all so much for being here. I am happy to answer any questions from the room or further explain any of the slides.
Hi, Krysti. Thank you. Okay, so it looks like we do have a question coming up. And let me go ahead so we're going to have a live question here.
Okay.
Thank you so much. That's a wealth of information, and I'm sure we have a lot of folks trying to think through, apply to their own context. I'm going to go ahead and read this question, unless, here we might have a live question.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
But I could say it out loud too, whatever is easier.
Sure, you can go ahead. You're live now.
Okay. Hi, Krysti. Thanks so much for your time today and your expertise. I wanted to ask, so it sounds like with the pre-apprenticeship, like based on the definition, it needs to lead to, like you mentioned, an apprenticeship, that ideally, but then also like a degree program, maybe vocational school as well. I was wondering, what if it leads directly to the workforce?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a pre-apprenticeship program, and I guess it really depends on how it's built and what the occupation is. Normally, a pre-apprenticeship program is very entry level, right? It's building that foundation so that an individual can move, and gain other skills. So I know it contextually, I was talking about it with young people. I was talking about it really with like your high schoolers or maybe your fresh out of high school kids. Like that's in my brain where I see pre-apprenticeships. However, pre-apprenticeships can be any age, any level of skill set. I know that there's companies across the country that do this for folks who are kind of like looking to reskill. So maybe it's somebody who was, a cook and they want to go back to school and learn whatever skill that might be. Let's just say that it's like coding or cybersecurity or something. And then they look into pre-apprenticeship programs. So an individual who comes with that skill set and moves through a pre-apprenticeship program, depending on how strong it is, absolutely could move into the workforce. But I think that kind of comes with the definition of a pre-apprenticeship, right? There's no defining factors on it being 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, right? I know there's programs that exist out in the world that maybe they don't even call themselves pre-apprenticeship programs, but they are, in that they are building out pathways so that individuals can move into a job or an apprenticeship program. I think the beautiful part is that if you make the options available, that's still a win, right? I mean, there's no losing if a student goes through a pre-apprenticeship program and gets a job right after. That's what you want, right? That's like the best case scenario. So, but we see it kind of, if you needed another step, right? It's like pre-apprenticeship, registered apprenticeship, continue in their career, right? That's like the gentle next step, if it went pre-apprenticeship, career, I mean, that's amazing.
That's great too. Yeah, no, absolutely.
That's,
No, thank you for sharing that. No, and I like how you kind of defined it, saying too that it's not as rigid and structured as like a real apprenticeship. It's like that beginning stage, like the precursor. So that's really helpful. And the last question I had, just adding on to this, you mentioned earning a specific credential, but I was wondering, like, could it be replaced with learning like a specific set or just like a technical skill? So just thinking that maybe if that credential isn't available, or if the barrier is like a high cost, could we replace that with like learning specific technical skills? um,
yeah. I mean, is there anything that comes to mind for you as an example?
let's see.
It's okay
I
if
mean,
not.
if it was like, well, I was just thinking if it was like Microsoft Office Suite or things like that, because I don't know if there's really a certificate like learning, Excel. It might be just like certificate of completion for learning it online. And
Yeah.
so that's why I was just thinking, like when you mentioned barriers, that if we wanted to maybe start this earlier with like sophomores, we could help them learn just maybe those foundational skills like that. But I don't know if there's an actual credential that could be paired with that. But they would be learning valuable technical skills that they could build on top, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I totally see what you're saying. And you're right. So, and that's actually a really great example because you're right. Like with Microsoft skills, right? Like I don't have a credential that says I know how to use Microsoft, but I know how to use Microsoft, right? So, I think that that's an example of one where you are moving students through like the technical skill set that they need, where they can still put on their resume like I am proficient at this, right? I know how to use these, and that in the workplace they can demonstrate that particular skill set, right? They would be practicing it probably every day in some capacities, right? In some workplaces. So I think that's a great example of one. I also think that if maybe that is a particular thing they learn, well, maybe there are other credentials that they can learn or industry vetted, something they can do that demonstrates that they can take with them. So maybe it's something like taking because I believe there's exams that you can kind of take through Microsoft to like demonstrate those competencies, or even like LinkedIn Learning or some online learning classes where they're low cost and you can actually go through and have those connect to your LinkedIn account. Something that does actually show proof that the students learned X skills during their pre-apprenticeship program is pretty vital, right? Because then the students, not only are students not great at being like, these are all the things I learned, right? They're like, I learned these things. I don't know. Like they're kind of like, I guess I learned these things. But not only does it help them quantify all the things they learned, but it creates that legacy for them so that again, it's portable. They can take it with them. They have it. So if they ever need to lean on it, they can lean on something. So, so even if it's like, I mean, certificates of completion are okay, but to me, they're not industry valued. So I like there to be some other additional piece. Like, yes, I got a certificate of completion. I did pass this pre-apprenticeship program, but I also got my Google cert, or I also got my Microsoft, Word certificate, or whatever that might be. So I think having one component of that is really valuable. But I do like, to your point, I do think it's valuable too that is they're still going to have developed that skill set. So even if there's not a credential attached to every single beautiful thing they learn, they will actually have a set of skills that will transfer wherever they go with their career.
Yeah, that's a great idea about connecting it to LinkedIn as well, because we could even, just thinking of the industry partner that they're matched with, we could even have them endorse that skill, like you said, keeping it portable, something that they can lean on. So awesome. You have more questions, so I'll let you go. Thank you so much, Krysti.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Okay, we do have a few more questions, so let's get to some of these. How about within the high school context. We have a high school thinking about how they might take some first steps to implementing a pre-apprenticeship program. What would you suggest for them?
Oh, that's exciting. I'm working right now with the state of Mississippi on building out teacher apprenticeship pipelines or pre-apprenticeship pipelines. So this is really, I'm happy you're asking these questions. So I would look actually at what you have that already exists. So a lot of times schools have some CTE programs already built. So, or even if they're not maybe like quantified as CTE, but they're something that is going to, it's like a narrow set of learning. So for example, in some of the high schools that like I worked in the past, or some of the schools we work in now, there are like nursing, or there's even like IT. We have a couple that were health, like just healthcare at large, which was a really interesting one. That one maybe wasn't narrow enough. And so focusing on like your CTE pipelines and seeing what you currently have in place, and then where do those students go, is probably my first two places I'd start. So if you have a CTE pipeline that, like, I'm trying to think of an example of one that I know, like hospitality. Hospitality might be a good one. So hospitality kind of CTE pipeline, maybe that starts their junior year and goes in their senior year. And when students graduate, they can maybe go work in the hospitality sector in X occupation. I'm not sure what that might be, but of course, Hawaii, hospitality is your thing, right? Tons of hospitality in your state. So your junior year, you can kind of do this in a couple different ways. If it starts your junior year, I would say that's your year to kind of build out your foundational skills. That could be your pre-apprenticeship year, or you would have your pre-apprenticeship year, maybe your senior year. And that their junior year is when they start the learning and they decide if they want to transfer into a pre-apprenticeship, or they can do their own thing. It just kind of depends. The most successful ones I've seen are where in their 10th grade year, they have to think about how to enter into a pre-apprenticeship program their junior year, and their senior year sometimes can be a registered apprenticeship program that starts, or you just kind of like push it around. And I wish I had a visual. I'm sorry. I'm trying to answer the question. I have a visual in mind, which actually I will send over to the team, the Partnership to Advance New America, or excuse me, the Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship. It has a great visual of how to kind of bake this into a school. But starting, it should be, what do you already have? Do students actually move on from that into the occupation of their, that they're learning? And do you have employers? Like, do you have employers that are already invested? So the teacher one works really well. And this is getting a lot of hype all over the country right now, because school districts are not only training the kids, but then they're hiring them. So you have a junior year, senior year, pre-apprenticeship to apprenticeship pipeline. They move into a teacher aid to teacher credential training program. They're done in 3 to 4 years. And then they literally are being paid the whole time by the school district they just left, and they funnel back into their school district when they're done. So that's a really great example of one that already is kind of existing and popping up all over the country. So if you have where they start, do they actually stay in this field? Do they transition from high school into this field? And do you have employers in place? That would be where I'd put the three together. And actually, if you're thinking about building a program too, I'm happy to like share my contact information, and we can also talk about it in a deeper way if you need to.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful. Shifting to outside of school, someone's asked a question about where youth can find these opportunities. So if we think about a student or a teacher who's trying to support a student, and that school doesn't have this type of program, where else are you seeing in other states and communities pre-apprenticeship programs living?
Yeah, I mean, community-based organizations would be where I see probably the wealth of them popping up on the fly. Not that schools don't have them or colleges don't, but to that point, right? Like a college may represent a whole, like in Hawaii's case, like a whole island, right? Like that, So CBOs are one that I see. They can be a little bit more agile. I also see some workforce boards having them kind of pop up as well, or just workforce organizations hosting them. There has been a lot of money that has come out of the federal government for apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship. Off the top of hand, I don't know if Hawaii received any of that money because I just don't know off the top of my head. But I'm assuming that there is some apprenticeship money in your state, but I don't know exactly what it's for. So it's hard to say. And I think that's kind of the hard part with pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeships at large, is that they are kind of siloed a little bit. And that they do actually, for the most part, yes, you do have some that are going to say, hey, we're opening this up to a wide population. But for the most part, they're going to be for a specific population in a specific place, you know, because people are going to have to show up in person for certain training, right? So they're going to need to be local. So there's not one set place, unfortunately. I wish I could give you this magic location to go find them. I wish they existed, and it's making me think I should create it myself. But, you know, yeah, maybe that's what we need to do here. But also, I would say that your CBOs should have some types of programs, and maybe they haven't taken off yet, or any like workforce nonprofits or workforce boards would know what's out there in your state.
Great, thank you. Our next question, we do have a couple of more. To our audience, there is a little bit of time left in the session though, so if you would like to have a question answered live, please go ahead and drop it in the chat. So the next question that we'll ask you to address is thinking about a particular group of students. Is there a checklist of sorts that can help teachers of students with disabilities? Thinking of the high school setting still, to gauge their readiness for entering into workforce.
So I feel like what I want to do with that question is go back and ask my team, because there may be something that exists that I am not privy to. And actually, I bet there is something that exists I'm not privy to. So I feel like I need to go back to my team. One resource that I would encourage folks to look at, and I can add this to the chat, Dana, but I can't see anything in the chat. But let me just pull this up. And there also was some, and I don't know who actually received these dollars. Just put this into the chat. I do not know what it just dropped into the chat. That was very bizarre. 1 second. Okay. Is that we have with JFF a diversity hub. So this absolutely will have some resources on how to support individuals with disabilities. I think for me that I have a lot of questions about maybe like the depth of disability, right? Like where we're really at in that scale. But our DEI hub may have some great resources. And if they don't have resources, I can absolutely get more information from my colleagues. There are funded partners nationally who are funded to actually build out registered apprenticeships for individuals with disabilities. But the thing is I don't know off the top of my head who maybe has those dollars, but I know they do exist. So I know these resources are being built as we speak. And that's a great question and something that should absolutely be elevated to basically any school. So thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, that is a great question. And I do think we have, I'm not going to be able to pull up the resource right now, but I do think we have some beginnings of that in state also. Let's see, and I will add that resource into the chat. Okay, I'm going to read this one directly. And to the audience member, if you would like to come on live to give more information, you're welcome to do that. But here goes. How about pre-apprenticeship? thinking of how to share with students and use as a tool to help them grow their skills. So maybe thinking about, if we're thinking of juniors and then going into seniors for an apprenticeship and then on to additional education or workforce, what's happening? What are the suggestions for 9th, 10th grade students? What even might be promising practice for middle school?
That's a great question. So I'll start with high school and then I'll circle back to middle school. Because middle school is one that is just wildly untapped, right? Like this is just like a world that I feel like, we all do like STEM camps or like these little quick blips, right? But students still cannot maybe even grasp how this really affects their future in a certain way or how it's applicable or whatever else. So start with high school. And I think actually the pre-apprenticeship is really just the programming on career education. And I think about the teacher pathways that we're working on in Mississippi as a very solid example. And that is that 10th grade year, right? That 10th grade year can be that exposure or that introduction year where maybe they're not getting a full year of programming. Maybe they are, but they're learning about like, what is this career? What do I do? Here are examples, right? You're learning all those foundational pieces. You're understanding what it means for you. How do you see yourself in that career? And then their junior year, they're actually like TAing a classroom, right? They're practicing some level of skill set. That's the pre-apprenticeship that would go into place. And they're actually having to develop, like they're getting paid for some of it. Like it's a beautiful model. That 10th grade year really is that pre-apprenticeship. I also think about there's like some IT training programs that exist around the country where the students have to go through like they apply, they do their thing, they apply. And then once they're into the program, they have to show up for like a week-long introductory orientation, right? Where they're getting to know their peers. They're actually like getting acclimated to the technology. They're learning about what it is that they're going to do. That also could be kind of that pre, right? Those introductory, like this is what it's going to mean to you before they actually get into the hands-on training that is a pre-apprenticeship. But also to that point, a pre-apprenticeship could be a pre-apprenticeship too. There's no real regulations around there's no regulations around what a pre-apprenticeship is, period, right? You can really build it to be what you want it to be. So it can be something that is so introductory that a student is literally learning, like, what does IT mean? It can be that introductory. It can also be all the way advanced up to, oh, I already know how to do all these things and now I can do them and now I'm ready to go into the field, right? It can start from that point and end at that point if you wanted it to. But I do think that the pre, like the 10th grade year is a great time for a pre, if that's the vision, because 10th graders are just an interesting little group of humans, right? They're like, really don't know what's going on. They're right in the middle of high school. It's a weird year. I'd say a weirder year than 9th grade. And that's a good year to get them framed up for junior year, which is so impactful on their future, right? So that's one. And then with middle school, it's like, I think 8th grade is really, exposure to certain fields is absolutely super, super important as, early as folks can really go. But I think 8th grade, understanding how it works to jump into high school is probably the right time to do something like that. The thing about it is that you really still need those really, really active, like hands-on types of programming because of the age group at large. And I think it could be sold, right? Especially as folks transition or they're looking into high schools. If you're in a location where students can choose from a middle school to a high school, like, hey, I get to choose which high school I go to. If that's something, well, then it would be great for the high school to say, hey, we're going to do this introductory program in the 8th grade and try to entice students to come to our high school and give them this set of education. It's also really great for parents too. Like parents love that stuff. So I think that that's not a bad idea. You also could have your students in high school lead the middle school thing. That is a great application of their skill set. I'd highly recommend that. Plus, they're really not that much older, and the middle school kids, I look at them like the coolest things in the world, right? Like high schoolers are so cool when you're in middle school. So I think that's a great way of developing that rapport. And then it builds that funnel for you so that hey, my learners or my students are going to get this information in 8th grade. They come in, maybe they stay engaged in 9th grade, your pre, who knows, right? Your 10th grade is maybe another introductory, and then 10th grade or 11th grade and 12th grade, they're going through a pre-apprenticeship. I would say that could be one really cool model. And if you get that going, I totally want to hear about it.
Yeah, that makes really good sense. I have probably a last question that we'll have time for that shifts gears just a little bit. We know that we can't set students up for a credential or a skill that really isn't like the first layer of what they should be acquiring, that we really need to understand how to align the skills and then the credentials with what industry values. So, and you gave some great examples of those during the presentation. Do you have any recommendations for how industry goes about identifying those basic skill sets, and the soft skills and the technical skills, and then the credential that, sure, if they could have 3 different credentials, here are the ones that would be nice to have, but what are the ones that they're really looking for as a first credential?
My recommendation would be to convene some employers, in all honesty. And I know that might actually sound like a little bit of I guess it depends, right? It depends on the sector. I also think, and this is really for specifically like certain white collar occupations and really, really tech at large, LinkedIn will have that information on it. On what the skills are really wanted by employers, soft skills and technical skills. Those will both exist on there. But even with that, I mean, when I worked for a workforce board, we would convene employers like once a year and be like, tell us all the things. Oh my God, they change their minds all the time. So it depends on the industry. If you're in an industry that is, or thinking about an industry where it's pretty stable, it's pretty like there's maybe one road in and one road out. Maybe you don't need to convene employers. Maybe it's talking to one employer, right? But if you're looking at maybe even healthcare or you're looking at technology, those are going to be 2 sectors that are going to maybe have different opinions on what they're looking for or what they need. And I would say to convene employers and ask them. Also, when you get them to the table, that is a really good time to keep them engaged and have them come visit your classroom. You don't let them off the hook. You continue to engage them, and it builds a really great rapport or a partnership, right, with your school and that particular institution, whatever company it might be. I've seen some really powerful partnerships come out of that. So I would say that would be my recommendation out the gate.
Okay, thank you so much. And we're going to end on that note. Krysti, we so appreciate your time and all of your wisdom, and those follow-up resources we'll be sure to get to the participants today. I know everyone joins me in thanking you, and we do have a session evaluation link, and I've dropped that in the chat. I'll go ahead and share screen for the QR code for those of you who are looking for that. Let's see, it's in here somewhere. Here we go. Bring that up. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.